Before we start singing, just a word about the sermon today. As you've heard me say so many times over the past few weeks, we read the Gospels together all through Lent, and at the end there was a surprise assignment that those who signed up for this event didn't know about, which was to write your own Gospel. We decided to not let Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John have the last word, but to claim our status as saints of God, people who have direct access to the mind and the heart of God, and so to provide, to produce, to create, to write, to paint our own Gospels. Some of those Gospels are in the booklet that's inserted in your bulletin, and 3 of them will be offered today by friends and members of Plymouth Church.
So reading the Gospels during this Lenten season could not have come at a better time for me. I find myself unexpectedly facing some major life decisions in my professional life, and I'm not a person who can compartmentalize things. You might call it obsessive. So I found myself reading the text daily as a reflection of my next step and my guide. I find myself wanting to seek action, but action with discernment and wisdom and patience. And I would note also glibly that none of these things come really natural to me, especially prior to this experience. But as I read through these texts, I was reminded that having been exposed to these words at a very young age, and having much of them cemented through the years of time spent in the pews, and especially through music, I've had the advantage of a lifetime of repetition. That familiarity helped me to focus the familiar words on the page to the changes in my life. The readings of these stories, proclamations, prophecies, and teachings have been for me a guide and the beginning of a process. I had made a promise to myself to try to have patience. I've had a promise to myself to guide myself with some authenticity and good intention and with a little gentleness. And I honestly don't think that I would have arrived at those promises right now to myself without this experience of reading these together. Jesus knew that he only had a short time on earth to make a difference in his own life, and I don't begin to compare myself to Jesus or to his life, but there are clues in these books as a guide to living. Taking the time to read and discuss the nuances that we did is beginning to help me to draw out the important things that I think I need to guide myself in my next steps. My unreasonable goal for my personal gospel had been to draw a map of Syracuse and extract stories and verses that represent meaningful times and meaningful places in my life, bringing me to this point with arrows pointing to my hopes and dreams for me and my community, kind of a gospel reader and community geographer. But that didn't happen, but it is becoming, in my head, this map. So I'm just going to give you 3 little moments on my map. So I'm going to start with Matthew 5:9, which is, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And I'm going to place that on the south side of Syracuse. It's Elmwood Presbyterian Church, which is my very first church, and the home church where I began to hear these words for the first time. And I'm going to place it there especially today because that faithful congregation and my mother are in the beautiful discernment process of what's next. What's going to happen is that place that was vibrant and exciting and interesting and grounding could close in the very near future. Then I'm going to take you to St. Paul's Cathedral, my next church home, and I'm going to give you Luke 1:46. "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior." And I place it there because that's where I sang countless renditions of the Magnificat. And countless times I found myself being the person that was able to sing those uplifting songs from the most feminist voice, the most feminist point of view in the Bible for me. And then my last one that I'm going to give you today is John 6:30. The passage begins, "I can do nothing on my own. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just not because I seek to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me." And I'll place that right here with us in this space. I want to thank everybody for this amazing journey, especially to Kathleen and Abby for being our guides on this. And it's been really fun. I have a new pod of Plymouth Pals. It's really been great. And I just want to thank all of you for this refreshed way to map my next steps and for giving me a new way to look at my life through familiar songs and words.
When I approached this exercise, I imagined what Jesus might say to me if I asked him to tell his own story. Listen, if you want me to tell my own story, it's going to sound different from what you've heard. Are you ready for that? Explaining the unexplainable is tricky, and doing it with primitive tools like your words makes it more difficult. If you tried to create a replica of the Colosseum with toothpicks and marshmallows, you might convey the general shape of it. It might not hold together very well or for very long. The viewer would really need to use the mind's eye. You'd have to rely on their faith. So we'll start with that in mind. I used miracles and metaphors to jolt people from their routine. I wanted them to act. My words and my life and the whole Bible are tools that I want you to pick up. A shovel doesn't dig a trench by itself. No paintbrush alone ever created a masterpiece. Your action is required. Reach, wonder, build faith, even criticize or get angry. Remember the parables about who could find the promised land and who could not? I was trying to say that if you want to get there, you have to open the car door, get on the bus, or put one foot in front of the other. Those who do not will have a tough time. Those who place other things above this work will face difficulties. I held my arms wide and invited all to come in. What people heard was that my way was the only way. In those days, folks wanted clarity. A thing had to be this or that. Come to think of it, people are still that way, aren't they? I did say that through me, everyone can find the kingdom of heaven. I also said that everyone has the power to find it within themselves. Both are true. And it's also true that there have been others like me called to offer a path. You've heard about some of these teachers, and some have gone relatively unknown. Some are from before, some are here today, and some are on the way. It's always happening, every day, every moment. In my life, I became angry and felt loneliness because I am one of you. I breathed love and hope because I am part of something bigger. I challenged corrupt authority as people who hate injustice do. The human in me felt fear and despair near the end, while the other part of me grew stronger. There were accusations, betrayals, thorns, nails, the cross, and the forgiving. I looked down at the crowd, some weeping, some mocking, some indifferent, and I said a prayer of forgiveness for them all. That prayer is still on my lips every day, and it is yours for the asking. Do read my story in the Bible if that's what works for you. I think you will find some of the words so sweet to the ear and to the heart. If my story doesn't work for you, I hope it moves you to find something else. If you reject it, knock it down with all of your power. Blow it up so it leaves a hole that needs to be filled. When bombs level a city, new roads need to be carved out. You have the power to cut the path and pave it and walk on it, but you never need to do it alone. There are many ways. Use them. Come with someone or something else. I'll see you when you get here. For those of you who choose my path, come and share it with me. Leave explanation of all that is behind. It's not about that. Your world is bounded by things, but spirit is not. It just is. It does exist. Know that. One more thought from a story told after mine. Love is the most important thing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It never fails. When facing the trials of finding your faith, at times you will feel like a child, unable to understand. Talk, think, and reason in this way. There will be time enough to grow and put all of the confusion behind you. Someday you will know fully. Until then, be guided by faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love.
In the end, it was a matter of choice. It always is, you know. Choice can be consciously planned and plotted, or choice can be a series of decisions that bring you to today, this hour, this minute, indeed this very second. So it was with Jesus. He stood before Pontius Pilate to answer to the charges against him, to be judged on his works. The miracles performed, the parables spoken to the masses, the conflicts centered in the temple. But, you see, he knew his fate. We, the outside observers, don't know from biblical chronicles when Jesus knew what his choices would lead him to. Certainly, as young as 12, when his parents found him in the temple in discussion with the Pharisees, there was a depth of understanding in him that was unusual for one so young. As an adult, his statements had become heretical, not only to Roman rule, but especially to the established hierarchy and activities of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Temple rules had strayed from the spiritual to the mundane and secular issues of Jewish life. What to eat, when to wash, rules on keeping the Sabbath, temple activities such as money changing and paying for burnt offerings. Jesus spoke vehemently against many of these practices, angering the Pharisees who plotted against him. Jesus knew time was running out, so as some were healed, he asked for secrecy. But joy has its own good news to share. The common people in their need came to him in vast numbers, and many more miracles were performed. There was no going back. The word was in him, and the word of him spread. The choice had been made. The status quo was shaken to its core, and the events that would follow took on a life and a speed of their own. Something had been set in motion that there was no more capacity to control. But perhaps that had been true all along. Time became the enemy, and Jesus knew the fate of those threatening Roman and temporal authority, a cruel death by crucifixion. The Pharisees were more than happy to remove the troublemaker by handing him to the Romans. When Pilate desired to release him, the Pharisees contrived to stir up the crowd to ask for his death. Jesus did not defend himself when he could have. Pilate questioned him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "You say so." In the end, it was a matter of choice. It always is, you know.